In this video, you will learn how to source from China, India, Vietnam, and the US, what are the differences between these countries, and how to choose the right sourcing destination for you. Today, our guest is Gary Huang from 80/20 Sourcing, and he will be comparing what are the pros and cons of sourcing and finding products in these countries. And of course, if you like anything useful in this video, don't forget to click the like button below. Hello, Gary. It's nice to have you here. Could you please tell us what you do in Amazon space?
Yes, definitely. Well, it's an honor to be here, Augustus, and I'm an Amazon seller myself, and I also run a site called 80/20 Sourcing, where I help Amazon sellers save time and money with their sourcing. So, today we're going to talk about sourcing from different countries, including China, and obviously now with the trade war and with COVID, there's a lot of different complexities. So we're also going to cover some different options, such as India, such as Vietnam, and such as USA, to give people a more well-rounded picture of the pros and cons, where to source from.
All right, great. So let's jump to the slides.
All right, so today we're gonna ask one of the biggest questions on your mind if you're sourcing product for your Amazon business: to China or not to China? That is the question. So as Augustus and I discussed, I'm the founder of 80/20 Sourcing, and I've also, for a decade in China on the ground in Shanghai, I've managed multi-million-dollar sourcing campaigns for my clients. I visited over 100 factories all over China, so I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of this business. And I've also been featured in Forbes, in NPR, and Bloomberg as well, with content related to sourcing and Amazon and e-commerce. So who is this webinar for? So Augustus said to tailor it to more intermediate and advanced level sellers. So that's what it is mainly for. But if you're new, I think you will get some value out of it as well. Basically, it's for anyone looking to add new products or optimize their supply chain for their Amazon business. So today's game plan is this. First, we're going to discuss the pros and cons sourcing from China, India, Vietnam, and the US. Then we're going to look at ways to do this, to source products that are made in China and these other countries. We're also going to review the quality of the products and also the processes of doing this. And also we're going to review which countries are best set up to meet our manufacturing needs, because everyone's products are different, okay? So before we begin, I'd just like to give you this strategy that a lot of supply chain professionals have. I work with many supply chain professionals all over the world. So basically it boils down to three strategies. The first one is a China 100% strategy. So sourcing everything from China. So I think many Amazon sellers begin this way. Secondly is a China plus one strategy. So that could mean China plus one other country. For example, China plus India, China plus Vietnam. And then thirdly is China plus N strategy. So for those of you guys that don't remember your calculus class from high school, N could be any number. It could be 2, it could be 1, it could be 3. So on a high level, I'd like to share with you, this is the type of strategy that many supply chain professionals adopt, and I think it could be useful for many Amazon sellers as well. So first, let's cover China. All right, so made in China, what are some examples? Basically, when you ask the question, it's not, can it be made in China, but how much will it cost to be made in China? Virtually everything under the sun can be made in China. If you take a look at one of your big box retailers like a Target or Walmart, most all of this stuff, ranging from computers to eyeglasses to shoes to razors, everything's made in China. And as you can see here in the pictures, the Canton Fair is probably the biggest trade show in the world. It's, you could walk there for probably days, if not weeks, and not see everything, okay? So it's a very broad variety of products that you can have. So first, let's cover the benefits. Why source from China? So a couple of pros. Number one is tremendous product selection. Again, as we mentioned, you can probably find almost anything. Number two, it's easier to find suppliers compared to the other countries we're going to talk about. So you have online tools such as Alibaba. You have other sites like Global Sources, and you can now many of the, at the time we're talking, many of these trade shows have been postponed, and you can even go online to attend these trade fairs. The third thing is, because China has such tremendous experience in manufacturing, the workers tend to have a higher level of productivity. So that means for the same amount of time, they can get more work done, they can produce more product. And then we'll compare the other countries' productivity levels as well. Number four is talking about more efficient logistics. So that means the shipping and the whole process tends to go more smoothly with fewer delays as a whole compared to some of these other countries. And then number five, the quality may vary. I mean, a lot of times China gets a bad rap. They say, oh, it's a crap product, it's made in China, obviously. But at the same time, if you look at your iPhone, for example, where is that made? Even though it says designed in California, that's made in China as well. So China, the quality level could be high, it could be medium, it could be low. So the quality may vary. So now on the other hand, let's look at the cons of sourcing from China. Number one is the rising cost. Okay, so this is besides the tariffs. The labor costs in China have been rising for many years. China isn't as cheap as it used to be. There's also environmental costs, because China is trying to clean up their country. So me personally, I think this is a good thing, but at the same time, to make the factories produce products more cleanly, they have to invest in more equipment to reduce the amount of emissions, et cetera. So this causes the cost to continue to rise. Number two, and this is a hot topic right now, talking about the China tariffs, the trade war, or the Trump tariffs, as some people call it, the higher tariffs on imports from China. You're talking about 25%, on top of your import duties. Okay. Number three, the language barrier. It can be very difficult. Sometimes, even though the suppliers you're dealing with, they speak English, there's still some miscommunication that's very difficult to get around. Okay. And then there's also a cultural barrier as well, because doing business in China can be very different from doing business in the West. Okay. Number four is long shipping times if you're shipping by sea, because if you're shipping by air, it can be quick, but if you're shipping by sea on a boat, it's going to take at least 3 weeks to over a month. Right now, at the time of this recording, Amazon is also experiencing a lot of delays getting their shipments inbound into their fulfillment center. So you have to plan ahead. And number five, quality may vary. Just as we said earlier, it could be good quality, but at the same time, it could be poor quality, depending on the type of suppliers that you work with. So I wanted to give you a complete picture of the pros and cons of sourcing from China. Okay, next, switching gears, let's talk about India. Okay, so India recently has been growing their manufacturing sector extremely quickly. So they're looking to model China's economic growth. And in fact, even the leader of India, Modi, he said that he was emulating or trying to model their economy from China about 10, 20 years ago. And how did China grow so quickly? Manufacturing was one of the biggest things. So India is really pushing their manufacturing at this time. So what are some examples of stuff that you can get made in India? So as you can see here, India is quite strong in a couple of different areas, especially in wooden products, for example. A lot of products made of natural materials. India has abundant natural resources. When I traveled to India last year in October, I witnessed this firsthand. They had very high quality wooden products, also with leather products. India has a very abundant leather animals that can produce very high quality leather. And India is also very strong in eco-friendly materials. Okay, so there's a big trend right now to go eco-friendly, to go green, and then also with lighting. Okay, so this picture actually is the wrong picture. We're not talking about a lighting like a light bulb, but more like the lighting fixture. So like the type of stuff that you may see in a nice fancy retail store. The type of lighting you might want to have in your living room or in your bedroom. So India is very strong in certain types of products. Okay. Next, let's look at some of the advantages of sourcing from India. Number one is lower costs. Okay, so on a whole, the labor cost in India will be cheaper than China. Okay, so you may be able to get a cost advantage sourcing from India. Number two, no tariffs. Okay, you don't have to worry about the trade war, the additional 25%. Number three, they're high quality in certain products. So, the ones that we discussed earlier, the eco-friendly products, wood, etc. And number four is most everybody in India speaks English. So there's virtually no language barrier. There may be some cultural differences that we're going to discuss, but as a whole, the English level in India is very high. Okay, so on the other hand, let's look at some of the cons. Number one is expect delays. Okay, so on a whole, it will take longer time to source your product from India, both for the manufacturing as well as the shipping. Okay, so talking about manufacturing, there's a need that you need to constantly check in on the suppliers, constantly check on the manufacturers. I was speaking with one of the seven-figure sellers I interviewed on my summit, and he's based in India. He's Indian. He sells seven figures on Amazon India. He sources from Indian suppliers. He shared with me after he places an order in India, you can't just sit back, and wait like a month and a half and expect it to be done. Like, literally, if you do that, it's not going to be done by that time. Okay. So what he recommends is that at least every week, you got to constantly check in, either WhatsApp, email, constantly check, on the status of the order. Why? Because in India, the culture is they feel if you don't check, that means you don't care. Okay. So if you don't check, that means that they're going to put your production on the back. Okay, so you're going to get delays. So you have to be very proactive. Okay. Number three is expect longer shipping times, because if you look at the map geographically, India is further away from the US. So it has to go like a longer ocean route, compared to shipping from China. So that will result in a longer shipping time. Okay. Number four is it's harder to find suppliers. It's not as easy as going on Alibaba. In fact, when I visited India last year, I was part of a panel of Amazon sellers that we were presenting to a group of Indian manufacturers. There were about 50 manufacturers sitting in the room. And then, we're talking a little bit about, how to get found by Amazon buyers. And I mentioned Alibaba. And then in a totally unscientific survey, I just asked, can I get a show of hands? How many of you guys are on Alibaba? And then I counted about 4 hands out of the 50 people in the room. So that's like less than 10% of the Indian suppliers. Again, this is totally unscientific, but it just goes to show that it's a lot harder to find suppliers sourcing from India. Okay. And then number five is lower productivity. So again, given the experience China has, they've been doing this manufacturing business for over 20 years. Many of the workers, they're better trained. The management is more efficient. They have the whole supply chain experience, the logistics, they got like a pretty well-oiled machine. India, they got a late start. Okay, so I expect lower levels of productivity coming from them. That could mean, longer lead times. It could be more defects. So you have to be careful with that. All right. So you're probably asking, how do I source from India if we can't go on Alibaba? Okay, so I like to share with you 5 ways that you can find suppliers from India. Number one is the Delhi Fair. The Delhi Fair is kind of like the Canton Fair of India. So it's one of the biggest trade shows in India. It happens twice a year. It's based in Delhi, and they have many different sourcing like exhibition halls. Again, it's not as big as Canton Fair, but it's quite big for what it is. And again, at the time of this recording, the fair has been postponed. But the good thing is there's some online trade shows that I'm gonna mention later. Okay, so Delhi Fair, that's kind of like the Canton Fair. That's number one. Number two is a tool that I like to use. It's from Jungle Scout. It's called their supplier database. So if you have a paid subscription, Jungle Scout has this tool that lets you scan through the U.S. customs records of imports. So that means that if you see a company that manufactures products in India, there's a chance that you can use this database to find out their Indian supplier, because it scans through the customs data. So it could show you the name and the address of the supplier. Okay. Number three is Google. Google still works. Sometimes it's right under your nose. So you can try to Google your supplier in India, or to find a supplier in India. For example, if you're sourcing this like stainless steel water bottle, you can Google India, like stainless steel water bottle manufacturer, and then you can go from there. Number four is globalsources.com. So for those of you guys who don't know, Global Sources is another they have trade shows, but they also have an online website, a database of suppliers. And then they do have a section on India. Alibaba does as well, but the reach is not as thorough, obviously, compared to China. So definitely check out Global Sources. And number five is a Facebook group called India Sourcing Trip. And this is run by a friend of mine named Megla Bardwaj. And then she has many years experience sourcing in general. And she runs a very active Facebook group, India Sourcing Trip. And then she actually organizes this virtual India sourcing show. So I believe every month she has this sourcing show where she features suppliers based in India, and then you can connect with them online. So it's almost like an online deli fair. So these are 5 ways that you can source from India. All right, next, let's switch gears to our third country, Vietnam. Okay, so for those of you guys that don't know, Vietnam is based in Southeast Asia. Okay, and here are some examples of products that are made in Vietnam. In fact, you may own some of these products. They may be, you may be wearing them, or you may be using them day to day. So a lot of the clothes that you see, a lot of apparel, for example, from stores like H&M, they're made in Vietnam. A lot of footwear, shoes, they're made in Vietnam. And the third thing is a big one. Okay, a lot of bags. So not only backpacks, messenger bags, it could be, for babies, it could be for pets. A lot of these types of bags are getting a lot of traction made in Vietnam. And then the fourth thing is furniture. So tables, furniture you use in your home, in your office, etc. So these are examples of products that Vietnam is strong in manufacturing in. So next, let's take a look at some of the pros of sourcing from Vietnam. Okay. Number one is there will be a lower cost than China. So labor costs are lower. There's less environmental costs. So you'll save some money on the cost side. Number two is no tariffs. Okay. So again, we're circumventing the trade tariffs, the trade war. So you're saving 25% off the bat, probably. Number three is there's less bureaucracy. Sometimes, China, government gets involved with manufacturing. A couple of years ago, China suddenly instituted an environmental regulation new law on factories, and then just literally overnight, thousands of factories were shut down, and a lot of people were just left out in the cold. So we find that Vietnam tends to have less bureaucracy when it comes to that. Okay. And then number four, if you're sourcing products and shipping to EU, you may be very interested in this, because there is a EU free trade agreement between Vietnam and EU. So certain products, they fall under this free trade agreement, and you may be able to import these products duty free. So not only are you circumventing the tariffs, in fact, you could get duty free. Okay. So that would be a huge advantage for your business to compete against the competition. All right. On the other hand, there's a lot of disadvantages as well. Number one is the limited product selection. You're not going to find the same variety of products that you see in China. Vietnam, we talked about apparel, footwear, bags, furniture. These are the strong ones. There are certain other industries as well, but there will be a lot of bottlenecks. You won't get the same selection. Okay. Number two, and a lot of people are unaware of this, the MOQ is going to be a lot higher when you deal with Vietnam. Okay. Instead of talking about like 500 units, you could be, you would need to order 1 container load minimum, because many of these factories, they're more used to dealing with like a Nike or like an H&M, like these huge multinational companies. They're not as flexible when it comes to Chinese, compared to Chinese suppliers willing to do like 500 pieces. So just expect that MOQ may be higher. Number three is the quality level may vary. Okay, you may find suppliers that can make very high quality, such as for like Nike, but there could be very low quality as well. Number four is it's a lot harder to find suppliers. Again, Alibaba doesn't have great reach in Vietnam. And number five, also similar to China, lower productivity. Interesting story I'll quickly share with you guys to indicate the lower productivity. On one of my trips to Vietnam, flying back from Vietnam to China, I sat next to a lady, like a middle-aged Chinese lady, and then she started chatting with me, and then I asked her what she did, and then she said that she runs a factory in Vietnam. She's been based in Vietnam many years, and she was returning to China on a trip. And then I asked how does it go? How's it going? How's it compared to China? And she said that it was very difficult to even get the Vietnamese workers to work any overtime. I mean, they just stick to the regular 9 to 5 Monday to Friday schedule. Whereas in China, there's this phenomenon called 996. I don't know if Augustus, you're familiar with this, but it was popularized by Alibaba, Jack Ma, like his employees, like 996. They're expected to work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. And then they're willing to do that. In China, in manufacturing, it's the same. In fact, the people, they want overtime. Why? Because they want to get the overtime pay, the bonus pay. Okay, that's China. They're willing, like the workers are really willing to put in extra hours to get paid. Whereas Vietnam, they tend to enjoy their lifestyle more. So Monday through Friday, weekends, really hard to get people to boost that. I mean, that's difference in work schedule and culture, but also productivity as well. Similar to the reasons we discussed with India, because China had the head start with the manufacturing. 20 plus years. They have better management. They have probably better training, equipment, higher quality compared to Vietnam. So expect lower productivity. All right. So you're probably thinking, okay, how do I source from Vietnam? So I'll share with you five ways you can do this. Okay, number one is the Vietnam Expo. So this is one of the largest trade fairs in Vietnam for you to find suppliers. Okay, number two, again, the Jungle Scout supplier database. It scans through U.S. Customs records. So if you see a product that's made in Vietnam, for example, a backpack, you want to find their supplier, you can use this tool to try to locate their supplier. Okay, number three is a website called V-Town. V-Town can help you identify suppliers in Vietnam as well. Number four is Global Sources. They also have coverage in Vietnam. In addition to Alibaba, I would also give Alibaba a try as well. And then number five is the American Chamber of Commerce website in Vietnam. They also have a listing of manufacturers based in Vietnam that they recommend. So these are 5 ways that you can get started sourcing in Vietnam. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, last but not least is the USA. Why USA? Because number one, probably many of the people watching today, they sell in the US or they're based in the US. So, at the time of this recording with COVID, there's a lot of uncertainties with the supply chain. What if, China gets hit with the second wave and everything shuts down again? Will I have a hard time getting my products, right? So it kind of makes sense that you want to cut some of that risk by sourcing somewhere close to home. But at the same time, there's pros and cons to this. So first off, what are some examples of products that are made in the USA? Number one is apparel, clothing. This type of product still does have manufacturers in the US. For example, in Los Angeles, my family, my mother, she's a retired fashion designer. And then she had a very small warehouse, and then she outsourced to some local factories in the fashion district in Los Angeles, in California. So there still is manufacturing based in the US. Number two, plastic type products, such as you can see here with the plastic bottles. Their plastic products still has manufacturing advantages in the US. And number three, furniture. Okay, so I mean, by all means, this is not complete of examples of everything. It really depends on what you're looking for, but this will just give you a general idea of the type of products that you can find made in the U.S. So let's talk about some of the advantages. Okay, number one is there tend to be a higher quality of product made in the U.S. it's more, that's basically the main thing that the U.S. can compete on, right? I mean, U.S. can't really compete on price when like minimum wage could be like, $15 compared to like, pennies on the dollar in Vietnam. Okay, so higher quality. Number two is faster shipping times because it's domestic. You don't have to put it on a boat. Okay. Number three, there's no language or cultural barriers. Everyone speaks on the same language. I mean, they're pretty much in the same time zone, if not just a couple hours apart. And then if anything happens, legally, it's a lot easier to get people to be accountable versus trying to, press charges against a supplier that's like overseas in China or Vietnam. Okay. And then number four, there's potential for unique customized products. So this is something a lot of people aren't aware of, but you don't have to get all of your manufacturing done in China. For example, you could get the base product done in India, and then you can add some customization. So I'd like to share a quick story, an example of one of the sellers that I featured on the past Seven Figure Seller Summit, an American seller based in Michigan. And he shared his product on the summit. So this is not confidential information. He basically sells funeral urns. So these are metal type of funeral urns that used to, put like deceased, urn ashes in. Okay. So he shared with me, how he launched his 7-figure business. He started sourcing this product from India, because India was good with a lot of manual labor intensive type products, like these types of metallic urns. Okay. So he would source the product from India. He would import it into US, into his warehouse. And then he would offer the customer customization. For example, Aunt Sally, they would want to put their name, the deceased person's name on the funeral urn, right? So he was able to do this locally in the US because you're not going to sell like 10,000 pieces of Aunt Sally's funeral urns, right? So by doing this locally, he was able to find a supplier in the US to do it. And then he was able to add 30% to the selling price of the same product. Okay. So I encourage you guys to think outside the box, because you may not want to do 100% of the manufacturing in the USA, but you can add, like the last details to boost your selling price and also to differentiate your product, because that's one of the biggest ways to succeed is selling on Amazon. All right. So let's look on the other side of the coin. What are some of the disadvantages of sourcing from the USA? Number one is probably high costs, right? Because again, labor isn't cheap in the US. Okay. Number two is the limited product selection. You're not going to be able to find, most of the stuff that you can find, overseas in China. Number three is it's harder to find suppliers. Alibaba doesn't work at all for the U.S. in my experience, and we'll talk about some of the resources later, how to find these suppliers. And then number four, a lot of people are unaware of this, and this is a misconception, is in the US, there's no one-stop shops. So what's a one-stop shop? Basically, if you source from a supplier in China, they may be able to offer a customization, they're gonna source all the raw materials for you. They may be even able to get the packaging for you. So it's like a one-stop shop. They can find, most everything for your product. They can, do the FBA, the barcodes, everything, right? But in the US, this isn't going to happen. Okay. In the US, a lot of the times, even if you find a supplier that you want to work with, you may have to provide the materials, or you may have to provide the tooling or the mold if they don't have it. I mean, they simply they're not willing to do it. They don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the engineer on staff to do that modification for you. Okay. So don't expect a one-stop shop. So this is one of the biggest disadvantages sourcing from the US. Okay. So you're probably asking, how do I source from the US? So I'd like to share with you 6 ways. Okay. Number one, Google. I mean, it kind of sounds like a no-brainer, but a lot of people never check on Google. So, definitely use Google. Google is your friend. Number two is a website called ThomasNet. And number 3 is a website called Makers Row. So these are a couple of websites that offer suppliers in certain industries such as fashion and apparel. Okay, but by no means are they as complete as Alibaba. I kind of wish someone would create a really good website for this, and I think it kind of makes sense because the U.S. is really trying to bring a lot of these jobs in manufacturing companies back, but I mean, you got to find them, right? So, I mean, if anyone's listening, maybe that could be a big business idea for you. Number 4 is to hit the streets. Okay, what do I mean by that? To physically, visit a lot of these shops that you're seeing, a lot of these retail establishments. They could be like a mom and pop shop, and they may be struggling right now because of the pandemic, right? Because people aren't willing to go outdoors and risk exposure, right? So maybe you can help them sell on Amazon. Maybe they never had this idea before, right? Okay. The next is a website called Wholesale Central. This is a way that you can find wholesale suppliers as well. And then finally, trade shows. This is highly underrated because when you're sourcing product, you don't have to necessarily fly to China. You don't necessarily have to go to Canton Fair. There's many trade shows that happen all year round across the U.S., many different industries. There's the fashion industry trade shows, magic show. They happen in Las Vegas twice a year. There's pet trade shows that happen in Florida. There's virtually, trade shows in any sort of industry. So you don't necessarily have to travel internationally. Okay. Obviously at the time of this recording, many of the trade shows are postponed, but I expect them to resume, once we resume life as normal. Okay. So these are 6 ways that you can source from the USA. And then, in terms of making a decision where to source from, I just wanted to share with you some data that I found, based on the world's export volume. Okay, so this is based in 2019. This includes the tariffs. The tariffs have already hit. Okay, so the biggest exporter in the world is China. Okay, they lead the way at $2.4 trillion. Okay. Number 2 is actually a little surprising. It's the U.S. at 1.6 trillion. So you might be thinking, how can the U.S. export, so much? Actually, the volume may not be high, but it's just the amount, the cost, because the U.S. manufactures like airlines, think like Boeing, right? So they make a lot of these very expensive type products, not like consumer goods that you see on Amazon. Okay. And then if we look at India, they actually only made the list at number 18. Okay, 324 billion. Okay, so I mean, they're very far down on lists. So and Vietnam, I mean, didn't even make the list. It was at 264 billion. Okay, so what does this mean? So for me, looking at this, it still seems that China is leading the way, like heads and shoulders above everyone else. So it makes sense not to discount China, even though there's the tariffs. Just looking at the data, China is still leading the way. I'm not saying that things will not change, but just be aware of, as of right now, China's still leading the way. However, India and Vietnam, they are up and coming. So if you looked at the data like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, China was around where India was right now. Okay, so things can change, but as of right now, the vast majority of products is still made in and sourced from China. Okay. So to help you guys remember what we covered today, I created a cheat sheet that summarizes all of the different ways to source from China, to source from India, Vietnam, and the US, and also links to all the resources, to all the websites we covered. And then you can find that at www.8020sourcing.com/OKS. Okay, again, www.8020sourcing.com/OKS to sign up to get that cheat sheet. And also you can get our free email newsletter to get additional information on sourcing best practices. So with that, thank you, Augustus, and thank you everybody for watching. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Gary. And a few times you said, oh, just use Google. So what exactly we should put in the Google? What is your suggestion? For example, I want to source aluminum bottles. So, and in India. So what exactly should I put to find a manufacturer?
Yeah, I would start with that. Aluminum bottle manufacturer in India. I would start with that. I mean, there's no magic formula. It's you got to put on your detective hat and do a little digging.
All right. Okay. And you covered basically 4 countries, I think. Yeah, China, India, Vietnam, USA. Is it that other countries in Asia, they don't have infrastructure, or language is too poor, or I don't know, labor is even worse with productivity than what you said in Vietnam and India? Like there are countries, Thailand, Taiwan.
Yeah, Thailand and Taiwan are very different. If we talk about Thailand, you do see some of the big companies starting to source from Thailand. For example, Apple, they've opened up factories there, and you can find certain products, made there as well. I don't believe their volume is as big as Vietnam. That's why I didn't cover Thailand. Taiwan is a little different. Taiwan actually had a head start in front of China because they had manufacturing even before China. And then if you look at like a quick history lesson for you guys, I don't want to spend too long, but basically many of the Taiwan manufacturers, the factory owners, they led the way. They were pioneers to be in the manufacturing in China. They actually brought the intellectual property, they brought the manufacturing know-how, they trained the Chinese workers about 20 years ago. And then that's why, China was able to begin, because at that time, China had super cheap labor, but they didn't have the whole productivity and then the knowledge. Okay, so today, Taiwan, most of that manufacturing has already gone to China. There's still pockets of products you can source from Taiwan. The cost will be higher, the quality may be higher as well, because that's the only way it can compete. Because most of those factories, they already left Taiwan decades ago.
All right. Good. Thank you very much, Gary. So could you tell us what if you have any services for Amazon sellers, what do you offer for them, and what's the best to find you?
Absolutely. So I run 2 websites that Amazon sellers may be interested in. The first website is 80/20 Sourcing, where I have a blog that's free, where I blog about best practices sourcing from China and from other countries. So you can check it out at 8020sourcing.com. And I offer training and I offer coaching as well. As of right now, I'm not taking on new sourcing clients because, as the saying goes, I'm teaching a person to fish. I'm not fishing for them. The other website is I also run an online event called the 7-Figure Seller Summit, and I interview successful $1 million e-commerce sellers, Amazon sellers, to dissect the ways they did it, so you guys can do it too. So we run events about once a year. So if you guys are interested, feel free to check that out. 7figuresellersummit.com.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Gary, and good luck in your business. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Augustus. Bye-bye.
Leave a comment below this video and tell us which sourcing destination you would choose: China, India, Vietnam, or the US. And here is another video where we talk about Amazon FBA product sourcing from India, what cultural differences you might face when working with India, and what does the PACA rule mean.